Let's talk about declarations and definitions. Before you can use a name in C++, it has to be declared. In other words, for identifiers other than keywords, which is to say in the most common case your own variables, you need to inform the compiler what kind of entity you're talking about. So for example, we could have an int named count, and here we're making a declaration. Now, I'll admit there's a risk of too much terminology here sometimes. We're getting lost in subtle little distinctions between terms like declaration and definition, and there is some variation in these terms even among programmers and textbook authors. But it can be important to be able to make this distinction, especially when you're consulting outside sources. In a nutshell, a declaration introduces an entity by saying its type and giving it a name. A definition, on the other hand, is a declaration that causes memory to be actually set aside for the entity. So as a result, the example we've got here is actually both a declaration and a definition. So we've declared and defined this int variable named count. We've informed the compiler how much space to set aside for any value we might place there, how to interpret the values once they've been provided, and what label will be used to refer to that location in memory. And now we could place a value into that memory location if we wish. Now, given that I've said that in this example we've got something that's both a declaration and a definition, you might be wondering whether there's something that we could show that's just a declaration but not a definition. Well, we could, for example, declare a function if we want to. In this case, this is actually a function prototype, which we'll learn about in later lessons. But this is an example, if you're curious, of something that's a declaration but not a definition, because it doesn't actually set aside memory for that function. In fact, as you'll see in the videos on functions, this line really just declares to the compiler that there's some function by this name that takes no parameters, which we will presumably use at some point later in our program. This statement by itself does not cause memory to be allocated, so it's not a definition. In order to be used, it would have to be defined somewhere else. Note that there's nothing actually stopping us from supplying an initial value at the same time as our declaration. In fact, we do that quite often. So we could go ahead and place the value 5 into this int variable, but we'll talk more about that in our video on initialization. So in this video, we've given some basic definitions of declaration and definition and contrasted the two. And I'll see you in the next video.